Hey everyone, it's Bill Duran here from Punished Props, and I'm fresh off of PAX and Dragon Con. And speaking of PAX, I just finished up a really quick little project for Scott Kurtz of PvP. Scott got a hold of me because he wanted to have a helmet made from his character Binwin Bronzebottom, the Dwarf Warrior, from Acquisitions Incorporated. They do a game usually every PAX, and this year was no exception. So he wanted a cool helmet that was lighter than the metal one he has and more accurate to his character's art. I was really stoked to work with Scott because I've been a huge fan for a really long time. So I jumped right to it. And of course, I'm going to show you guys how I made the helmet. First, I met up with Scott so that we could hammer out the design and also so I could measure his melon needed to make sure it would fit him perfectly. Then I designed up the helmet shapes, the bucket, and the horns. For the dome, I made sort of a cross section in both X and Y axes and cut those out using my bandsaw, cleaning them up a little bit using the disc sander. These were attached together in an X shape so that they would form the contours of the helmet. They got glued down to another piece of wood, and then I filled in the quadrants using an expanding foam. Then all I had to do was trim away the excess foam, and then I used a rasp to shape the foam back down to those contoured wooden pieces. The rasp did all of the rough work, and then I went back in with a whole bunch of sandpaper and different grits to get it down to the form that I wanted. I did a similar technique to make the horn shape, this time using the bandsaw and a little bit of tooling foam to cut out the profile shape. Then I tapered the end a little bit, and again using that rasp and some sandpaper, brought it down to its final shape. Now these weren't going to be the final pieces, I needed to mold them, and I wanted to make sure the surface was perfect, so I coated it all using an epoxy resin called Epsilon, and once that cured, I could go and sand it down to a nice smooth finish. To make sure that it looked the way I wanted, I would spray it with a little bit of red primer, and then I could sand it and see where all the low spots were. I would go back and forth between sanding and priming to see all these spots, and then once it was close, I could fill in any small areas with a little bit of spot putty, and any bigger areas like the whole dome shape with a whole bunch of Bondo. Once that cured, I went back in with some various sanding tools to make sure it was all very nice and smooth. Then it was mold making time, and this is where I goofed up. Fortunately, you guys can learn from my mistakes on this one. Now, I should have used silicone. I use silicone for almost every single mold I make, but for this one, time was really short, so instead I used Alginate. Alginate dries or cures really fast. The problem is that I was planning on casting this out of urethane resin. Urethane hates moisture, and Alginate is 50% water. It all worked out in the end, but I had a ton of cleanup work to do. Anyway, I had my shapes done, and I poured a whole bunch of Alginate on top of them to make the molds. Then, once the Alginate was dry, I could liberate the pieces from the mold and get to casting. For these, again, I used urethane resin and various formulas to slush cast a thin layer of plastic on the inside of those molds. Then, once those cured, they could be pulled out of the molds and finished up. Again, lots of finishing. All that priming and sanding and filling and Bondo I did earlier, I had to do it all again. But I did do that all again until the pieces looked really great. For the horns, there were two of them, but one of them was broken off. So I took two castings of the horns. One of them I cut off. I also added some little circular pieces of styrene all around the edge of the helmet to act as sort of faux rivets. Then everything got primed and painted. We opted for sort of a semi-cartoony finish on it, so everything got a flat base color, gray for the helmet, sort of an off-white for the horns. And then I went back in with my airbrush and added a little bit of a gradient tone to both of those colors, just to give it just a little bit of cartooniness. Other pieces like the little rivets were painted by hand. Finally, I glued on some faux fur around the base of the horns, and then those just got drilled into the helmet from behind. That sounded really dirty. Gonna roll with it. And that was it. The helmet was all done. I took it into PAX with me and delivered it to Scott, who adorned it upon his melon like a champ. He seemed really excited about it. I was especially stoked to get it to him in time for the Acquisitions Incorporated D&D game, which happened at PAX. I want to thank Scott for being such a really cool client, and I also want to thank you guys for watching this video and checking it out. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. I do a whole bunch of prop builds like this pretty regularly, and you can check out some of them right here. And I want to thank you guys again for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next prop build.